Hello, my name is Jacob Parmar. Um, I'm a junior at George Fox, going to my senior year. Just completed my psychology internship with merging veterans and players. Hold on. There we go. What is MVP? MVP, merging veterans and players, is a peer-to-peer support group. Kind of just think kind of like a group counseling kind of thing. It was started by NFL commentator Jay Glazer, an NFL player and former Army Green Beret, Nate Breuer. Um, their mission statement is to create a world in which every military member, veteran, professional athlete transitions from service or sport to purposeful life empowered by a community that champions their well-being and success. The main idea is that with this organization, you have people who've been there and done it, so it creates that like sense of community, like, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. They do have psychologists, like clinical licensed psychologists for situations that require it, because the peer-to-peer part, the area leaders might not have that psychology background because it's mostly volunteer based. So just like, so they do have those support systems in place. So if somebody is, say, suicidal or going through a PTSD episode, that they have the help that they need. What were my goals going into this? To just identify like what's working, what's not working. Because when it comes to veterans, growing up in that world, kind of just noticed before going into my studies at George Fox in the psychology world that their needs are very different than a civilian's needs, or just anybody else for that matter. Especially when you come from this place like the military. My supervisor said it best. You're stuck in this in between once you get out. So MV, so like that's why their needs are a little different than what a civilian or first responder might need. To gain the My second goal was to gain the experience working with veterans, and in that like therapy, listening, helping role, that would kind of give me like a better insight of what this profession or career would actually kind of look like. Because again, even though I grew up in this world as an army brat, I wasn't really exposed to lots of the negative aspects of this part, even though my father did go deploy to Iraq multiple times, came back with that PTSD, and we really never saw the like really bad aspects of it. And number three, just to make the connections, meet people, that kind of thing. So what did it look like doing the intern? MVP met twice a week in person at a gym, 30-minute scalable workout, then like an hour or so talking part, which is like the actual like therapy. Um, Typically, MVP does do a once a week virtual meet. Our local area, MVP is kind of broken up into little sections. So our section in the Pacific Northwest, our coordinator tried to do like a Friday online, but that didn't meet because the official online virtual part of MVP was in on the East Coast at like 3 in the afternoon, and nobody here is off work at 3. Or if they are, they're driving or busy. So, and then the idea behind the workout is that you get the blood flowing and kind of just adrenaline, dopamine, all that fun stuff. And there's like, again, just going back to what I said earlier, it's peer to peer. Men have a background in that. What are my kind of big takeaways from MVP? My biggest takeaway is that kind of just what I already figured, that there was some stuff that was needs to be worked on. Some stories that were told to me were kind of just, oh, like doctors at the VA not being the best they could be. Because like makes sense because like you're repeatedly being like exposed to these negative attributes, especially after the 20 years of global war and terror. All these people coming in that have this like extreme amounts of like post-traumatic stress and injuries, kind of become desensitized to loss of it, lose lots of empathy. So we can go into this like, okay, I'm going to be like the best doctor, best psychologist, best whatever I can be to help these people, and then lose that. That was a big complaint. Something else that I learned was that maybe psychology needs to change a little bit to where people are not in a office doing counseling sessions, but maybe going out, kind of like mental health coach in a way. A particular veteran described it what he wants is like somebody he can keep in his back pocket that he can kind of just bring around, go out into the real world and practice skills that he learned or that they are working on. Um, and that's just like more of the psychology part. Something else that was talked about was some of the hospitals, especially the military run ones, still rely on older practices where they keep people who recently attempted suicide on like suicide watch, which is good, but the way they do it might not be the best because my MVP, especially our chapter or location, went to go see a member of their community who had attempted, and they weren't allowed to go in as a group, and they were only given 30 minutes for the entire visit, and it was from like 3 to 4. So my supervisor was recounting the logistics of trying to make that work because they wanted to go and show their support to this guy, and the like official hospital was kind of just stonewalling them and making it really hard. So yes, there's lots of good going on in the veteran space, but there's still things that need to be changed in lots of ways. And interestingly enough, when it comes to the research article that I found, some of the research articles I found for this experience, I found an article that was talking about group therapy and kind of like how people in a group are less likely to attempt suicide or and self harm because they have that like greater sense of, oh, I'm in this community, people need me, people care about me. So that kind of was interesting, kind of seeing that play out in real time while I was going through this group, and just like seeing how like, oh, the stuff we learn about in class, the stuff we've spent all this time reading articles about is actually playing out in real time, and kind of just like I said earlier with the whole hospital thing. Something else is that I already kind of knew this, but it's a great refresher. PTSD is different for everybody, and people express PTSD symptoms differently. I also found another article for this while I was doing my experience, and it's just PTSD is the same but different. PTSD is how your brain responds to different stressful situations, like take war, for example. Your brain reacts to keep you safe. So whenever you're at home and there's something that happens, like a loud bang, people often use fireworks, but that's heavily debated as an example. But like triggers that stress response to kind of just cause that reaction from your brain. And with the way your brain works, normally it goes from top to bottom because your top part of your brain is the smartest. The bottom part of your brain is the animalistic side of your brain. With PTSD, it goes from bottom to top. So you're not really able to say, hey, brain, I don't need that anymore. and it's like just like seeing it play out in person is always just a big thing. Um, some advice for somebody who's going into their internship, I would say go in with the intent to learn.